All right, whenever you're ready.
Action. Hello, my name is Jeff, and I am Filipino American. So, Filipino Americans have been around for quite some time, and we have made a huge impact in American society. We've been around to contribute much to the labor and work industry, and with that being said, why don't we know more about Filipino American history? Growing up, personally, I didn't know much about that history just because it wasn't in my history classes or textbooks. So today, I want to highlight for you Filipino American history and talk about different periods in time in which Filipino Americans helped in the aid of development in the United States. First, I want to talk about the rise of Filipino nurses. Secondly, I want to elucidate the World War II Filipino American veterans. And number three, I want to talk about the Delano Grape Strike farmers. First of all, there's a common misconception and stereotype about Filipinos in which most, if not all of us, are nurses or we want to pursue nursing. Why is that? When did that ever start becoming a thing? Well, according to the Britannica Encyclopedia, after the Spanish-American War, Spain sold the Philippines to the United States for $20 million, and after that, the Philippines became a U.S. Commonwealth territory. So the United States started instilling their American values, their language, as well as the American educational system. And so, because of that, if America ever needed overseas workers, it was much easier to find work from the Philippines just because we were already starting to become Americanized. This was all part of the Treaty of Paris of 1898. Fast forwarding 5 years later, we have the Pensionado Act of 1903. So this act basically allowed the United States to welcome some more Filipinos into the United States. We had elite class women from the Philippines study abroad in the United States to become nurses. And they, for the most part, would return to the Philippines and start establishing their own hospitals and teaching more nurses about nursing and ultimately encouraging more people to come to America to pursue nursing. Here we have a picture of those nurses coming to America and studying nursing. Another few decades later, we had a shortage of nurses both during and after World War II. With the Exchange Visitor Program of 1948 and the Immigration Act of 1965, we were able to combat that shortage. And again, we were able to hire overseas, Americanized foreign workers. And here we have a picture of a nurse during World War II hired behind that American and Filipino flag. All right, so nursing wasn't the only profession that was found in America. We were also known for being soldiers, especially in World War II. So, when the United States joined the World War II and wanted revenge with Japan after Pearl Harbor, it only felt natural to hire Filipinos to recruit them in their army just because they were closer to Japan. So, President Roosevelt promised those from the Philippines who enlisted full veteran benefits. That included access to veteran hospitals, citizenship, and even national titles. Here we have pictures. On the left, we have a Filipino soldier saluting under the American flag and the Filipino flag. On the right, we have a propaganda poster encouraging Filipinos to enlist in the army. Over 250,000 Filipinos enlisted and responded to that call of arms, and a quarter of them died fighting for America. When the war ended in 1946, according to CNN Politics, when the war ended and Truman became president, he retracted that statement and promised for the Filipino veterans, and they were not able to receive that compensation. So for over 75 years, those Filipino American veterans have been fighting for that compensation. 75 years later, around the Obama administration time, so roughly a few years ago, we had two different forms of compensation. The first form under Obama was that Filipino American veterans received $15,000 if they were now US citizens, or $90,000 if they were Philippine citizens. The second form of compensation was the Congressional Medal of Honor in 2017. So again, this is 75 years later, so keep that in mind because most of these veterans have already passed away. It received much critical backlash because these veterans didn't believe that was enough for their people, considering they fought for so long for another country. And some of them weren't even able to become US citizens. They were still forced to be Filipino citizens. So, my last point I want to talk about is the Delano Grape Farm Strike. So, we all know about the farmers' workers movement and how Cesar Chavez paved the way for better working conditions for the working class. But what if I told you that Filipino Americans were the ones who inspired Cesar Chavez? Here we have Larry Itliong, and he was an agricultural worker and activist that led the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, also known as AWOC. So, he led a strike in Coachella, California, in order to win a 40-cent per hour wage increase for the Filipino farm community. After this strike was a success, all the farmers moved to Delano. There, Larry Itliong invited Cesar Chavez and his organization, the National Farm Workers Association, NFWA, to join his movement. Now, to give some perspective, the landowners, they pitted the Mexican and the Filipino American communities against each other. And so they weren't on the same terms. But according to Aspera Cultura, Cesar Chavez actually agreed to join the movement, and together they came together to form the United Farm Workers. Together they did a 300-mile strike/protest in March from Delano to Sacramento. It was a huge milestone for the American working class. In conclusion, Filipino Americans have been around for quite some time and have helped shape America to what it is today. Whether it is providing medical professionals in times of need, recruiting soldiers for war, or even establishing better working conditions for the working class, Filipino Americans have been around to do just that. Filipino Americans have been and will always be around to make a huge difference in American society. Thank you.
Right, well, normally I would say the greeting seems unnecessary, but I like the way it worked with the topic that you're doing, because it is about identity, and so I think you did a nice job kind of making that work. There's a very clear statement of what the purpose is, and you've got a good preview of what the structure is going to be. I heard a lot of data in the presentation. I didn't always hear a lot of sources. That might be a little bit problematic, but there was good data, except that the war ended in 1945, so you're off a year there. But it might have been something else that was happening in 1946 that was related to those particular issues.
They got their independence.
There you go. That I knew that there was something going on there. So, you know, a little bit of misdirection there, but that was not a big deal. And you had an excellent summary at the end of the presentation, so I thought you did a good job there. So all the structural stuff is really sound. Most of the visual material in your presentation is solid. You've got good gestures. Your facial expressions and eye contact are solid. The eye contact is limited a little bit by the body movement that you have. You are swinging at the hips, but my friend, I mean, it's like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You're way too much. What you do is you focus on the visuals behind you. You keep, instead of just having them in the background, making a brief reference to them and then continuing your discussion, you keep going back to the visuals constantly. And it's not just by glancing over your shoulder. You turn your whole body, you turn your head away from us, and that's a problem. And there's just a lot. When you watch it, you'll see how much it is. That's where all your anxiety seems to be coming out. It's not, and it doesn't really seem like it's anxiety to me. It just seems like it's anxiousness or energy that's coming out. It's got to come out somewhere. Your vocal performance is very effective. You've got a lot of energy and enthusiasm in the presentation. Maybe you're rushing a little bit. You could probably pace yourself a little bit more and give us a chance to kind of absorb some of the information that you're talking about. So it's mostly the hip swiveling, turning away from the audience that's a problem, and maybe rushing a little bit. Everything else, I think, works really effectively. All right, thank you.